I just want to talk a little bit about Brenda Chapman. We're here today for her 7th novel, Second Chances. Brenda's an amazing author who's also a good friend of mine and a lot of people in this room. She is a talented writer, but I do have to say, if you've opened the acknowledgments in this book, you'll notice Alex Brett's name, Darlene Cole, Catherine Hobbs. I don't want to say we help her write these things, but but we do certainly enjoy reading them, and prior to them being published. And I've had the great honor of reading this book in the last couple of weeks. I had read it before it was in its final stages, and then had an opportunity to read it again. And as I was telling Brenda today, I cried in the last couple of chapters, and I read a lot of mysteries, and there's a lot of mystery writers here today, and a lot of people get killed in those books, and I never cry over them. So it's a really nice change to have the opportunity to feel something very deeply about the characters in her book, in her books. And this one in particular, Second Chances, is a coming of age book. And when I think about coming of age, I think about all of the things that kind of end for you as a youth when you start to realize your parents are real people and they have real problems, and that people do die, and there are other things happening in the world that are outside of the sphere of your wonderful childhood. So there's a lot of things that are going on in this book, and Brenda captures them so well, and I think that's why I spent the last couple of chapters in tears, because it reminds you. I know it's hard to think back when I was 15, but it's a few years ago, but it does remind you of that. And Brenda's writing is so beautiful, and I just wish I could talk like this when I'm in a regular conversation where the young girl says candy, like a stripper. I'd never seen one before, but figured candy probably could pass for one. She smelled of drugstore perfume and moved as if she had no clothes on. Like, why can I never think of things like that to say when I'm describing someone? So, but it's really wonderful writing, and it's so nice that you're here today. I do encourage you, for any of the authors that you enjoy, and Brenda is no exception, if you're reading books and like them, like Second Chances, take a moment to go on Google or go on some of the other review sites and post your reviews. It matters to the authors. It's an important thing to do, and to encourage the writer and to encourage people to buy the books. It's an important thing to do. So without further ado, I would like to invite Brenda Chapman up here to do a reading from her book and say a few words.
Thank you, Catherine. Catherine and I met 6 years ago at a Capital Crime Writers executive meeting. We were both new to the executive and didn't know anybody on it, and we've become good friends ever since. And Catherine is a huge supporter of the arts. She's before she was a counselor and now, and I really thank you for coming out, because I know you're really busy. So just a show of hands, who here was alive in 1971? Okay, who remembers 1971? Okay. Well, I thought I'd begin with a short recap of some of the major events that happened in 1971, the year this novel takes place, just to give a bit of context before I do a brief reading. So in 1971, the Prime Minister was... Yeah, that's right, it was Pierre Trudeau, and the U.S. President was... Yeah, it was Richard Nixon. And across the ocean, Idi Amin took power in a coup in Uganda that same year. All in the Family debuted in January on CBS, while The Ed Sullivan Show ran its final episode in March. Apollo 14 was the third successful lunar landing, with Alan Shepard was one of the astronauts. The Vietnam War was heading into its declining years. It ended in 1975, and in 1971, South Vietnam invaded Laos in February. Meanwhile, Evel Knievel broke the world record by jumping 19 cars on his motorcycle in California, and Charles Manson was sentenced to death in April, although his sentence was commuted the following year to life in prison. In July, Jim Morrison of The Doors was found dead in his bathtub in Paris. The South Tower of the World Trade Center was capped out at 1,362 feet, making it the tallest building in the world. The second tallest building in the world. I'm not sure what the tallest building was. Okay. The British upped their troops in Northern Ireland, remember that little battle going on, while Australia and New Zealand pulled their troops out of Vietnam in August. The Attica prison riots took place September 9th to the 13th, with 42 killed, including 10 hostages, when the National Guard stormed this maximum security prison in New York. On October 1st, Walt Disney World opened in Orlando, Florida. At the end of 1971, Nixon had begun shifting troops out of Vietnam and promised to remove 45,000 more troops by February in 72. Platform shoes made their debut, 4-inch heels. Nixon had begun mini skirts, hot pants, and bell-bottom jeans were also wardrobe staples. And the kids today might have their tattoos, but we had skirts so short it was obscene to bend over. The hippie lifestyle was very much in fashion. On November 8th, Led Zeppelin released Led Zeppelin 4, which went on to sell 23 million copies. And to cap off all these monumental occasions, Snoop Dogg was born in October. So I'll do a brief reading from the first chapter, set in 1971. Elizabeth rolled onto her stomach and trailed one fingernail in a jagged line down my back. It began with the soft pressure of her fingertip between my shoulder blades, a feathery tickle on my skin that increased in pressure as it made its descent. It ended with her nail breaking through and scratching along the base of my spine above my bathing suit bottom. When Elizabeth pulled her hand away, I let out my breath and bit my lip. My back stung like crazy, but I forced myself to lie still on the blanket, letting the cool breeze from the lake wash over me. No way I'd let on she'd hurt me. I'd swallow the pain whole first. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Elizabeth prop her chin onto a folded arm while she stared at me through her dark sunglasses, waiting to see what I would do. Her thin lips curved into a smile. "There ought to be a law against skin as white as yours," she said finally. "You're like a chunk of Gouda cheese, for Christ's sake." "Well, it is the beginning of June," I said. Not that I ever tanned exactly, but I wouldn't tell her that. "You're not so brown yourself." Elizabeth waited a few beats and said, "Compared to you, Darlene, I'm a toasted bran muffin." She turned onto her back, then rolled off the blanket onto the sand, spreading her arms above her head and letting out a loud sigh. "I'm so bored. What do you do for excitement in this hick place? Or maybe I'm asking the wrong person, seeing as how you're 15, and Lily and White could be your two middle names." All the reasons I hated being around my Toronto cousin were coming back to me. My mother must have known how this would play out because she'd made me promise more than once over the past week to be polite and make Elizabeth feel welcome. "Her parents are going through a hard time," my mother said, as if that gave Elizabeth a license to act like a turd. Like she was the only one in the universe whose parents had problems. I avoided confrontation like the plague, but I would have made an exception for Elizabeth if it wasn't for all those promises I'd made my mother. I knew Elizabeth was going to be trouble from the second she stepped off the Greyhound bus. She'd stood on the top of the steps, one hip thrust out, while she surveyed the gas station like she was God's gift to beauty queens forced into exile in a third world country. Then she tossed her long blonde hair back over one shoulder before climbing down the steps. She'd sauntered toward me across the parking lot in her skin-tight bell-bottom jeans, her platform heels click-clicking on the pavement in time to the snappy movement of her hips. "Hey, Darlene," she said when she finally reached the front door to Bill's Esso, where I stood leaning against a barrel of flaming pink impatience. I'd been left to watch for her while my mom whipped over to the grocery store after an hour of waiting for the bus to arrive. "I'd know you're a carrot head anywhere." I felt a blush creeping up my neck and face. "That was my plan," I said. "Grow hair this color so you'd recognize me." Elizabeth laughed and flung an arm around my shoulders, squeezing a little too hard. "Still the same little cousin I remember, easy to embarrass. It's been, 2 years? You've gotten a lot taller, but you're still a beanpole. Don't worry, your chest should start coming in soon. 16 is the turning year. 4 insults already, and we were still on hello. 1968, I said. Spring, 3 years ago. You and your parents came for the weekend. What makes you so sure it was then? Because you took me to see the Planet of the Apes at the Elgin Theatre. It was a Saturday night. I'd also checked my diary the night before, but wouldn't tell her that. Let her think I was a walking calendar. Let her think I had an elephant memory. I should have known Elizabeth wouldn't be impressed. Man, you have no life if that's something you remember. It's a good thing I'm here to liven up your summer. Yeah, how lucky am I? I kept my mouth shut and followed her over to the bus driver who was tossing luggage onto the pavement from the belly of the bus. He turned his head and smiled at Elizabeth, but she pretended not to notice. Part of leading men on was ignoring them when they showed interest. Elizabeth told me later it was dating rule number 1. I wondered if my skin had begun to burn yet. The sun was beating down on us and making the air above the sand wavy. Elizabeth moved closer and lifted her hand again to start tracing another line down my back. I jumped up like a jack-in-the-box and pretended to wipe sand off my stomach. Elizabeth sat up laughing. When she finally stopped, she wiped fake tears from her eyes and said, "You should have seen your face, it was priceless." I glared down at her, but tried to sound like she hadn't pulled one over on me. "I'm going to help Mom in the store. Are you staying here or what?" "I want to tan some more. I have a book to read in my bag, so I won't even notice you're gone. You can run along." She raised her hand in a peace sign before lying back down. What I'd have given to dig my foot in the sand and kick it all over her stomach. I got a few feet away and turned back. "Why'd you come to Cedar Lake anyhow?" Elizabeth propped herself up on her elbows and scowled. "My parents made me. Why else?" "Why'd they make you?" "Because I'm dating someone they can't stand, among other things." "So, they can't stop you from dating who you want. These are the 70s. But they can cut off my money. Plus, I flunked grade 13, so they're a little hard to get along with. They need time to digest that they haven't given birth to a genius." "What don't they like about your boyfriend?" "Well, let's see. Michael's 26 and I'm 17. He plays guitar in a band, and oh yeah, he's black." "Wow, I was impressed in spite of myself. Your dad must have been ready to kill him, or you." Elizabeth smiled. "Michael came for supper once and said never again. He'd rather eat nails dipped in rat poison." "Will you date him when you go back to Toronto?" She shrugged. I was getting tired of him always asking me where I was and expecting me to follow him around, but I liked hanging out with his band. They always have good weed. I waited a bit to see if Elizabeth would tell me anything more, but she'd stopped talking. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of baby oil and a thin book that she opened halfway through. "I'll see you later," I said. She didn't answer. I turned around and started walking away from her. I was more than happy to put distance between us. When I got closer to the road, I started running. "Stupid cousin," I muttered. "Why couldn't you have stayed in stupid Toronto where you belong? Why'd you have to come here and ruin my stupid summer?" Thank you.
My father has been an author all his life. He's published, I think, 6 books now, and I understand the challenges authors go through looking for a publisher. I think most of his books were self-published in the end of the day. And they're all great books. I love reading them. I've read actually one of his novels I've read a few times and reminds me of some of the childhood memories. So anytime I meet an author, I was going to say a young author, but a young author, yes, you know what I mean. Every time I meet a young author, I just have this great enthusiasm for them, for being out there, putting their thoughts, putting the pen to the paper, and publishing their book. So thank you all for being here and supporting Brenda, and congratulations and many success to you and your writing career ahead. Thank you.